Hey, now it's the Rob from 1061 here with my tag team partner in podcasting, the breathing one, Ramblin' Jerry Valeri. Good morning, Jer.
Good morning. Today we get to dive into a sea of terrible wrestling.
This is something I think every wrestling fan can relate to because, the longer you've been watching wrestling, the more really embarrassing stuff you've had to explain to people who don't watch wrestling.
It never fails for me that my wife will walk in on the worst
Yes.
of it, or like my mom would when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. They'd be like, you're trying to convince somebody, take a look at why I love this, and then the next thing you know, you're just like, oh God, no, why did I bring them out? It's the boat train again.
my buddy John, John, and we have the best story about this because he had the best walk in from his mom. A SmackDown was on in the summer of 2002 or 2003, whenever Batista was still the deacon for Reverend Devon Dudley.
Oh man!
Which I don't know how much you were watching at that time, but
enough.
There was a time where Reverend Devon was cutting a promo in the ring about how people shouldn't masturbate. And he gets interrupted by Ron Simmons, of all people. He wasn't with Bradshaw. I don't know if he was Farouk or Ron Simmons, I think he was Ron Simmons. And basically, Farouk comes out and basically cuts a promo on Devon saying that, hey, I love masturbating. And that's when Enter John's Mom happens. And so there's Farouk's cutting a promo about how much he loves to touch himself while John's mom is cleaning the living room or whatever.
My parents, and I think an attempt to try to relate to me later on. They used to watch wrestling with me as a kid, but then later when I, in my formative years as a teenager, Mae Young give birth to a hand in front of my parents. That's on my list. I didn't do a numbered list, but that's today. Mae Young giving birth to a hand.
Their whole relationship was an angle that I wouldn't even know how to begin to explain that to somebody. And boy, what a weird payoff for that pregnancy thing. It just seemed like the only reason it happened was to get to the ridiculous punchline of let's give her a hand. It was, how do you explain a young, virile, Olympic athlete, strongman lifter, Mark Henry, impregnating an 80-year-old woman? The whole thing was just so peculiar.
And in this area, people were paying a lot more attention to Mark Henry because his cousin, Kevin Henry, was playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the time. So it was people would report on it like it was news, in the Altoona Mirror. And then the next thing you know, a baby with him, but it's a hand. And then they're talking about it like it's real news.
The best was the Hollywood goop that they attached to the hand and the afterbirth and just how absurd. And not only that, Mae Young, just seeing her fake boobs flopping around, and
she was 200 years old at the time.
Watching her smoking a cigar while in bed with Mark Henry or whoever, just anything Mae Young is absurd.
So how do you want to jump into this? Do you want to organize this, or are we just going to run all over the place?
Well, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of organization, but I had some things I wanted to mention. So this topic is the worst in wrestling. It's inspired by last weekend's Battleground pay-per-view. For some reason, I want to keep calling that Backlash. The Battleground pay-per-view from SmackDown, which many people are calling the worst pay-per-view ever. And I really can't think of a much worse one. The only exception being December to Dismember from December of, I want to say 2006. Yeah, it was 2006, I believe. So you said you haven't seen that. You refuse to watch it.
I won't watch it now. And our friend Tony, who watches Post to Post, he said after you had mentioned that, he went back to watch it again, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it's not even now. So you can't even watch it for comic relief. It's bad. It's still just bad."
Yeah, I remember Haman getting fired right after that pay-per-view. Excuse me. Right after that pay-per-view. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm having a tough time over here this morning. Right after that pay-per-view happened, Haman bit it. Haman took the fall for that one. I remember the pay-per-view ended like 50 minutes early, not 15, 50 minutes early. And just was very poorly written. It just had nothing going for it. In my opinion, that's been my low bar. Then Battleground happened, but I think that the December to Dismember one was probably worse than Battleground personally.
Sure. So that's why we came up with it. I gave one with Mae Young in the hand. Do you have one? Do you have a terrible moment?
Yeah, I mean, there are several. I wanted to mention before we get to bad moments. I was trying to think of other bad things, like, bad wrestlers or whatever, or bad promos.
Bad gimmicks.
Bad gimmicks, right, exactly. I feel like the king of the bad promo, it's more of a Lifetime Achievement Award, although I could think of a few specific lowlights. Would have to go
a few people. Boy, I'm curious. Boy, I wonder if I could guess who you're going to pick, because there are a few people out there that give epically bad promos. They are known for it.
There are two that I think fit this mold, but one just really strikes me in all the right spaces for being funnier. But go ahead. Who do you think?
It could be Scott Steiner.
That's one of the names, but I would say he's second.
It could be Sid Vicious.
You named him. You got him.
God. Oh my God. Those guys, I mean, they're classic, Rob. They are classically bad on the mic.
So Sid is more quotable to me, because Sid, God, there was one time, my favorite Sid one's got to be the everyone knows you are twice the man that I am, and everyone knows that I have half the brains that you do, where he really got his words mixed up. That's a classic one. And then
Scott Hall dying in the ring. He says that, and you've got Hall and Nash all dressed up laughing. They couldn't stop laughing.
And so it goes something like, everyone knows you are twice the man that I am, and everyone knows I have half the brain that you do. And yeah, the outsiders are just losing it in the ring, appropriately so. And then Steiner was consistently bad. The thing about Steiner was, like, Steiner, this is something that John also pointed out to me. Steiner, imagine you had note cards for a speech you were going to give, and you had note cards in your hand for all the points you wanted to hit. And then right before you walk out, as your music's playing, the big bad booty daddy, holla if you hear me, you're about to walk down the aisle. Boom, I walk into Mike Awesome. And I drop all my note cards across the ground. And I'm picking them up, but they're not in the right order. And that's what Scott Steiner's promos sound like. Just like you could rearrange all the words and make a decent promo out of it, but he had all the words like in the wrong spot every time.
Every time. And some pages would be upside down.
And I also want to give one more award to Sid, if I could. Okay. Because I think Sid is the recipient of the worst injury to ever happen in a ring on TV.
To this day, that's hard to see.
He only
jumped off the second turnbuckle, didn't he?
Yeah, I forget what show it was. It might have been Sin, or I forget what the WCW pay-per-view was, but he was in like a triple threat match, something. He does like a weird kind of, I don't even know what kind of kick that is. It's just like, man, what kind of kick would you, I don't know, but he was doing a weird kick off the top rope where he landed on his left leg and was kicking with his right leg. And I mean, like a stalk of celery. The leg just snaps in half. And I swear, if Sid was not wearing like a boot to his knees, his leg would be broken, like dangle. His foot would be off.
Exactly. The boot is the only thing that kept his fleshy sock of a leg intact.
And then another great injury award I want to hand to Kevin Nash, especially because this is one that wrestling fans know and remember, and I was actually in the building for it because it happened in Philadelphia in 2002. It was like one of Nash's very first matches back. It was with that short-lived NWO in WWE, and there was an 8-man tag at the main event of a Philadelphia Raw, and it was so great. Everyone was so excited to see Nash back in the ring, and he makes a hot tag. And Nash comes in. He's all excited. He does his big step over the top rope, and he walks to the other corner towards the opponent and just topples. Just walking. Kevin Nash tore like his hamstring just walking in a ring. It was so funny, and just hits the ground screaming. It was absurd. What?
That's awesome. And that leads me right into one of my favorite injuries ever. I forget which Royal Rumble it was, but out comes Vince McMahon.
Yes.
He's looking like this.
Royal Rumble 2005. Yes, we watched that together.
He blows both quads, and he sits in the ring just yelling up at everybody.
It's so great because Vince is like a guy who's in like great shape, especially for his age. Like not even for his age of ancient. He's just in great shape. But he's putting so much into his exaggerated walk. And Jerry's right. He's got like the arms going and he's taking hard steps. And he pulls both of his hamstrings and delivers.
He doesn't blow one quad. He blows them both. Blows them both out.
So I learned a little bit more about that story, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
You know who he was pissed at that for? He was pissed at Eric Bischoff, and I'll tell you why. Short story. So if you remember, McMahon, because he tore his hamstrings, he gave the promo from a seated position with his legs fully outstretched. And he was cutting a promo about Cena and Batista, how they need to like restart the Rumble. He was looking for Eric Bischoff, who was the Raw GM at the time. He wanted Bischoff to restart the Rumble because they were supposed to have like a tie ending or something, but it didn't look good enough. So on the fly, they had to make a change and kind of like bring that match to a restart or whatever the decision was. Everyone was running around looking for Bischoff, and Bischoff ducked out early because he thought he was done. So he had to get a nice little talking to the next day about leaving his post early when you're the GM.
Yeah, you can't leave early. Well, because not only did Vince have to go out and cover for you, but he blew out both legs doing it.
That's the best one. You nailed it.
Looking at everybody's face in the ring, only Vince could pull it off too. An authoritative speech.
And because you and I we were just looking at you like, why is he sitting like that? Why is he sitting at all? What the hell just happened?
Right, we watched that together, didn't we?
Yeah. Or at least I think I watched it live. You weren't with me live. We watched it the next day or something like that. It was funny.
Right.
So
that's awesome. So yeah, those are great injuries. When I think of some bad promos, bad debuts, and the Shockmaster, poor Tugboat.
That's got to be the lowest moment probably in wrestling for that poor guy who everyone knows the story. Everyone knows the story of this once really powerful wrestler in WWE makes the jump to WCW. They want to debut him in a brand new gimmick, which is so strange, called the Shockmaster. And he's supposed to make this very memorable debut and then comes crashing through the wall.
In a spray-painted stormtrooper's helmet.
And you got, I believe it was Ole Anderson doing a voiceover for him, and he can't even get it going because he's laughing so hard. Oh, man, it was great.
I forgot that, like, Ric Flair was in that segment. They were all,
wasn't
a lot of heavy hitters.
Wasn't Davey Boy on screen, too?
Yeah, you know, and thanks to Edge and Christian for making fun of that immediately on the like first episode of their show on the network.
Yeah, they gave him a shot at redemption. I thought that was pretty funny. I think that you know, when it comes to storylines, this is where the bevy of options comes from. And the thing is, like, with the Shockmaster, I get it, he tripped. And with Sid, I get it. Speaking's not his strong suit. Same with Scott Steiner. I get it. These are muscle heads. These aren't exactly the world's deepest thinkers. I get where things can go wrong. When it comes to storylines, you've got supposedly the greatest minds and thinkers in wrestling in one room together, putting their heads together, and they agree upon these things to happen. So this is like, you can't point a finger at something going wrong or one person being dumb or something unbelievable. Like, it's just like, this is what they decided to go with these.
Right. What stories do you have? Like, because I've got a ton. I mentioned the gobbledygooker, which I totally got gobbledygooked on Thanksgiving. I begged my parents for this pay-per-view. I begged it. I couldn't wait to see what was in that egg. I don't know what I thought was going to come out of it, though. I don't know what I expected, but they've been hyping it up. And then I remember, like, on the Superstars right before, like the Saturday before, and you're like, oh my God, it cracked.
It's going to happen on Thursday, Mom.
We got to see it. And then the gobbledygooker comes out. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Shoot me now.
And Gene Okerlund's in there trying to get the thing over. Do you know who was? Do you know who the gobbledygooker was?
Who was it?
It was a Guerrero. I want to say it was Hector.
Really?
Yeah, and I believe the idea was, God, I want to say, I've heard Pritchard talking about this, and I think the idea was to try to get Hector over as like a wrestler, and I don't think he was supposed to be a turkey the whole time, but like he was the only guy who could pull off the acrobatic moves, and so I don't remember what the exact logic was for it, but yeah, that's it. That's a
actually have the gobbledygooker wrestle.
No, I think it was supposed to be more of like Hector. I don't exactly I don't exactly remember the details, but it was supposed to be more impactful than it was. I can tell you that. Like they did have a career plan for Hector or Tito, whichever one was in the suit or whatever. Jermaine, Michael, Janet, whichever.
Whichever one.
I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the obvious ones because I feel like the other low point. God, I remember watching this. It was 2003, maybe 2002. And you know what's even funny now is I remember it involved. I guess it was probably 2002 then, but I remember Katie Vick, and I remember Triple H having sex, dry humping, whatever you want to call it, with a mannequin corpse. And I remember it was for a feud with Kane, and Katie Vick was like a woman that Kane had allegedly killed in a accident or something like that. But I don't exactly remember all the details about why that even happened. Actually, maybe I do, but
I can sum it up because I wrote Triple H banged a fake corpse in a Kane mask. Underneath that, Katie Vick was like an unrequited love of Kane, and she died. I mean, that's the angle, right? That sums it all up. Fake corpse in a casket in a Kane mask.
And now he runs the company.
He's in charge of NXT.
Well, I'll tell you, pal, you did a great job banging that Katie Vick mannequin. How about we give you NXT, give things a try.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I mean,
that's definitely the point.
There was a lot of stuff around that time though that was really, really tough to watch. Do you know, were you watching around 2002, 2003 when a lot of this nonsense I'm about to bring up was going on?
I missed that. You're cutting in and out on me. What did you say?
I was saying because I'm about to bring up a few more from that time. I don't know. Were you a fan at the time? Were you watching 2002, 2003 ish?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was. I was just getting into radio, and I was still watching.
So, do you remember HLA? Jared?
HLA? No.
HLA was from the summer, I believe, of 2002. It was something. Do you know what it stands for?
No.
Wrestling fans, I guarantee you, the post universe, a lot of the guys remember HLA. And while do you think the concept might work, especially when you're gearing your shows towards males 18-34 at the time, it wasn't a PG show. They bring Eric Bischoff in to be the Raw general manager, and Bischoff has some changes he wants to implement into Raw. A little bit reminiscent of his days in WCW, and one thing he wants to do is HLA. So, of course, HLA, Jer, stands for Hot Lesbian Action.
I'm in. There you go. You got eyes.
And so was the writing staff, and they would they'd bring out lesbians. They'd bring out lesbians and they'd kiss for a few minutes. And the whole well, I mean, it was just kissing. I remember somehow Stephanie got involved with HLA, and which of course is even weirder because it's Vince's daughter and the whole thing, and there's that. And then I remember the premise was they did this to get over. Do you remember 3 Minute Warning?
Yes.
So 3 Minute Warning was a
and didn't 3 Minute Warning come out
and what?
Didn't 3 Minute Warning come out and beat a bunch of women up?
Yeah, that may have been the lesbians.
Oh, okay. HLA, there it is.
But that was the thing. So I think Eric debuted it as like they're going to do HLA for 3 minutes, and this was the first time we'd ever seen him. And then 3 minutes would be the code word to send out the essentially Samoan SWAT team. It was Rosie and Jamal, and they would destroy whatever was going on in the ring when Eric Bischoff gave the keyword, and the keyword was 3 minutes. That kind of concept was interesting a little bit, but so the HLA thing didn't last very long either. This was around the time of the Billy and Chuck wedding, which do you remember that one? Although it's a bit more watchable today. Just the fact that, and it was weird because like back then, this is 15 years ago, they were getting like GLAAD awards and humanitarian awards for putting over a homosexual relationship, but they were making at least when the wedding came along, they were making a huge
mockery of it.
Yeah, so it would be so distasteful for that to happen that way today, but just the whole thing was incredibly goofy.
Well, remember, we're going to talk about distasteful, something we watched, you and me together. Remember Muhammad Hassan? Distasteful as it got.
Oh, kind of trying to capitalize on the terrorist attack of 9/11?
Right, and then so it's taped. It's a taped SmackDown, and he comes out with all the other terrorists, and they're hooded, and they're choking the Undertaker with piano wire, and they like simulate a beheading, and then it's taped. Anyways, the same day as the London terrorist attack took place after 9/11, and then Muhammad Hassan was gone very shortly thereafter. I thought that's
what you get for doing what we tell you, kid.
I said, yeah, you're out of here. You did what we wrote. You're done.
This was also around the same time that Gene Snitsky punted Lita's baby.
I remember Snitsky and all those pimples.
Snitsky, yeah, he punted Lita, and I think Lita had Kane's baby, if I'm not mistaken. And then they're holding the baby, which is obviously not a real baby. And Snitsky punted it into the crowd.
Kane is one of those guys that, man, he's had some really bad bad storylines, but he's still future Hall of Famer.
This is still not far removed from 2005, the summer of 2005. We've talked about this numerous times on the show. Remember Dominic on a pole?
Oh, yeah. Dominic on a pole. You had Hector Guerrero on a pole.
You've got, well, technically it was a ladder match, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, and the custody papers for the rights, or whatever you want to call it, custody of Rey's real life son Dominic, hung at the top of that ladder, and that for some got to be Dominic's dad because wrestling.
Those were some bad times. I get the years mixed up, so I never remember if we were in the right era or not. But remember when the Big Boss Man fed Al Snow his dog, and then they had that terrible match in a kennel? Are you there, Rob? Rob, you've gone black on me.
Seems like, and this is why I'm so upset about the phone being out. But
are you there?
Oh, there you are. Hey, bud.
You disappeared on me. You've been kind of like Max Headroom, at least on my end. Like the connection's been terrible.
You've been sounding crystal clear to me, but I lost you there for a second. But we got to make
a hard time.
What's that?
Catching like every other word you say. So
okay.
That's why I might seem like I'm a little disengaged, because I'm trying to piece together everything you're saying.
Okay.
Did you hear what I said about Boss Man feeding Al Snow his dog and having a kennel match?
I did now. I didn't hear that until just now. People hate that angle. That to me is like, while it wasn't a great written angle or anything, and that match was certainly goofy, the Kennel from Hell match, I look back at that as a time of wrestling that I love, and because I loved everything else happening at that time, I forgive that angle and that match. In fact, I look back at it with affection.
Well, they were trying, it's hard to blame them when they're trying new things. Not everything is going to work. Being in radio, we know that. One of the things everybody hammers for, that it was a terrible idea, but you see why they did it. The Brawl for It All. I had somebody message me this morning and say, if you don't talk about Brawl for It All, you're missing it, because that's one of the worst ever.
Yeah.
And it was not good, and people got hurt, and it showed that some of these guys really don't know how to fight. But it was called, I see what they were trying to do.
It was called the Brawl for All. And yes, it was regarded as one of the worst ideas. It did so much wrong because like they tried to position it as real fights, which they in fact were. And it was all designed to get over Dr. Death Steve Williams, who was debuting in WWE, and they thought for sure would be walking away with this thing. But by positioning something as a real fight, you're telling your audience this other stuff is a whole bunch of nonsense. This is the real fight. And then, of course, came the other problems, which real fights can oftentimes be very boring, especially when they're housed inside of a wrestling show, which is very much a soap opera. And people got legitimately hurt, and it didn't get anybody over because the guy they wanted to win got eliminated like in the first rounds, and the guy who did win, Bart Gunn, they had no intentions of pushing, and they didn't. So the whole thing wound up being a huge mess.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
The fact that it happened is really compelling because it had no. I'm shocked knowing the decision makers in WWE, especially at that time, like that they would let something like that happen is really, really strange.
Yeah, they were liking that. UFC was just starting to get a foothold at that point, and after Butterbean or Butterball or whatever.
Butterbean, that's what happened when you won. When you won, you got a match with Butterbean at WrestleMania 15, also in Philadelphia.
And then Butterbean killed him.
14 seconds, not rocked his world, So the whole thing just exposed the business, and it did no good. Your friend who asked you about that was definitely right. It's an interesting story. The best place to hear about the Brawl for All in my opinion, is actually in Hardcore Holly's book. He's got a chapter dedicated to the Brawl for All, which he was a part of. And the insight on it is awesome. So you can check that out. I've got a few more here if you want me to bring up a few more things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Russo's time in WCW is plagued with really terrible ideas. You had like Judy Bagwell on a forklift, and you got to forgive me because I don't remember what some of the reasons were for these matches. You had Viagra on a pole. I remember you had, I remember there was a San Francisco 49ers match that had 4 boxes of stuff in the corner, but you didn't know what was in each box. One of the boxes held the world title. And I remember that match was, I mean, trust me, they weren't interrupting anything great. This match was awful. But it got interrupted by the Howard Stern Whack Pack. So, like, you had Beetlejuice and, like, Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf and Crackhead Bob all running out to interrupt the 49ers match.
Not Howard Stern. Howard Stern's Whack Pack.
No, trust me, both wrestling companies wanted Howard Stern in the late 90s. But Howard didn't want to do anything, so they went with what the next best thing, I guess, and that would be the Whack Pack. So there was that. And then, of course, we can't wrap this up without talking about another thing that always seems to come up on our show from time to time. Another thing that people point to as either bad writing from Russo or a real low point in wrestling, especially with the championship, and that would be David Arquette winning WCW's world title, helping promote a move.
That's a low point. I feel like that's a low point for all championships.
Again, yes and no. So, I mean, here's the thing about this. For some purposes, it comes back to Russo views that title as a prop. Wrestling fans and wrestlers view it as something more important. And again, I reiterate, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Both statements are true. Usually, I mean, the belt is used as a prop, as a writing device to get someone over. And it also typically represents that you are the best in your field. Again, not always, but it means that they consider you to be a money guy, and typically it means you're the best, and this is one of those times where it didn't necessarily mean that. But here's the thing, and then I'll let you talk about this because I know you've got a heated opinion about it. I will say a few things to Russo and Arquette and this angle's benefit, even though I'm not in favor of it. I will give it a little bit of a defense in that, first, the whole plan was to get mainstream coverage for WCW, and it was effective in doing that by giving I'll say a B-list celebrity the world title. And I will also say, to David Arquette's defense, David Arquette was a legitimate wrestling fan, and he, to his credit, did everything he could in his power to be respectful to it and to do that title run justice, which I admit isn't much, but he did what he could. And now I'll let you go ahead and chop it to pieces.
Yeah, the whole thing, and with Russo, unfortunately, I agree with him on a lot of things, but saying that it's just a prop, I understand it in a way that it is. But he did so much damage to the championship, not just there, but time and time again, coming out and the whole Jeff Jarrett and Hulk Hogan won't do the job, just lay down, and like that whole mess, and then David Arquette winning the championship. I mean, you gave me the book, The Death of WCW, and that was it. That's like the part of the book where things are dead. I know what he was trying to do. There were so many talented people in that locker room, and you give the belt to David Arquette. What are you doing? So
here's
that combined. And when I think of WCW, and it's not just Russo, because before Russo, remember they take Eric Bischoff's one good idea, the NWO, and then they put everybody in the NWO, or they start different WOs like the Latino WO and all the other WOs in the world. It was a mess.
You're right, but I think that you missed one key element when you described what was going on in WCW at that time. And the problem to me isn't necessarily that David Arquette got the WCW title. The problem was when David Arquette got the WCW title, it meant nothing. And the reason it meant nothing was because it's like literally, I think it was even more than every other week, the title was changing hands. And when your title is changing hands every other week, if not more so, people don't see it as anything special. You know, that's more frequently
WWE Women's Championship.
Yeah, or like honestly, it changes hands more than our Lock of Destiny does, you know. And even with the Lock of Destiny, it's like we that could.
What'd you say, Rob? Are you there? I see me. Are you there? Rob, I can't hear you.